Hey guys, welcome back to the Ms.Beehaven farm. Today I am going to be showing you guys how to make bee candy, which is a hard rock candy like sugar slash pollen feed substitute for bees in the winter. Starvation is one of the biggest concerns with hives coming out of the winter, like that last month or so of winter where we're going to have a lot of warm days. The sunlight hours are increasing. Bees are starting to get busier. They're starting to ramp up their production of their brood, the population of their hive, and they need a lot of food sources to sustain them. And then, unfortunately, we usually have a good couple cold weeks, and I mean, it's not like really consistent with the weather, so it's not unheard of to have hives start building themselves up because some of the nectar starts flowing. For instance, right now the red maple is blooming like crazy. But then if we get a freeze or a frost, which is still very likely, all of that stuff is dead. And they're basically, they have all these mouths to feed and no food source to forage on. So anyway, make sure you're checking your hives in the end of winter, going into spring for starvation. Just because, it's colder out doesn't mean they don't need food sources, especially here in South Carolina. We have pretty much flyable days for these bees most of our winter, so they can be exerting a lot of energy and needing supplemental food sources towards the end. And I know my hives, I just did an inspection a week or two ago when it was warm out and all of their honey stores were pretty much gone. They were bringing in some stuff. I've seen them bringing in some pollen and some nectar, but I definitely need to get some food substitutions on there for them just to help them thrive until we get a real strong nectar flow. So anyway, like I said, this is a hard sugar candy type of substitute. It's easy to throw on top of the hives. What I have is a whole bunch of, I've already pre-sprayed a whole bunch of these tins. I mean, you can just use whatever you have on hand. Paper plates even, you can spray them with just a little tiny bit of like non-stick cooking spray. I just get the cheap Aldi stuff. So I've already prepped all of my dishes. They're here on the counter and they're on top of a towel. Make sure you put some sort of protectant if it's a heat sensitive surface, because you're going to be putting boiling hot lava sugar into these pans and it will scorch whatever the surface is if you don't have some sort of protection on your surface. So that's what I've already pre-prepped. I've already pre-measured everything as well. So to make it very quick and easy, once you start going and the sugar starts boiling, it's very quick. You need to make sure you don't let it burn because caramelized sugar can actually make bees sick. So I go ahead and just pre-prep everything out, just pre-measure everything so it's easy and I can just start dumping things in as we're going, and it makes the process a lot less stressful. I've made this a few times. I've learned the hard way, like don't go digging for lemon juice in your fridge when you have boiling sugar on the pot, right? So yeah, other than that, just one other word of warning would be in the cooler winter months, I would make sure that you don't put sugar syrup on your hives. We've kind of learned as a collective group of beekeepers that putting sugar syrup, like a liquid feed, on your hives when it's still really cold at night can actually make your bees work harder because they are having to, a lot of the times they'll still have that liquid syrup in their guts. They have multiple guts, and it can chill them. So they're like stuck with basically a milkshake in their stomach all night long, trying to stay warm when the cluster is usually still pretty small. So you can actually be harming your bees just a little bit by having to put the sugar syrup on there. So just be mindful. The hard rock candy version is a great alternative. Like I said, they're super easy to put on there. It incorporates pollen into it. And I'll show you here in the recipe, I use some pollen patties. So they get a pollen, which is their protein source. They get their sugar source, which is their carbohydrates. And then there's a couple other like spices and things like that. A little bit of honey, a little bit of lemon juice. It gives them a pretty well-balanced snack, if you will, food source to get them through until the nectar flow starts. So without any further ado, what I have in this pot, I've already boiled. I'll put it back on here. I had to stop here to hook up my microphone, wasn't working. So I'm like one step ahead, so bear with me. It's not hard. I guarantee you can follow along and get to this point. All I have in here is 25 ounces of water I put in my pot. Make sure it's a big stock pot because it's going to be boiling syrup and you don't want it boiling over. So this is what I have here, you know. And I have it on the stove now. I just cranked up the heat again. And I'm going to get this boiling. I've already dumped in my sugar. Ideally, I would have been able to show you that, but like I said, after I dumped it in, I realized my microphone wasn't working. So, you know, this is real life. I'm not a technical genius and I'm not great with videoing, so sorry, this is what you guys get. But what I have here, like I said, is 25 ounces of water that I brought to a boil. Make sure you put a lid on it when you're bringing it to a boil, because that evaporation process through the boiling can actually evaporate quite a bit of the water out, and you want to try to keep it as close to 25 ounces as possible. 25 ounces of boiling water. Once that started boiling, I dumped in my 12 and a half pounds of just white granulated sugar. Make sure it's pure cane sugar. You can't use beet sugar or any of those weird alternative things. Like, you don't want to do stevia or anything like that. It has to be just good old-fashioned white pure cane sugar. And that's going to be the best sugar for your bees. So I took that, like I said, I pre-measured that all. I kind of stuck everything in. Let's see here. I had a bunch of these, you know, these 4-pound bags. So I did 8 pounds. That was 8 pounds, obviously. So I just dumped in 2 full bags, and then I measured out the rest of what I needed in here, so I could just dump, and it was super fast and easy. And when you first put it in here, it's gonna be super thick. It's gonna be like a paste. You really gotta jam at it to get it all mixed in good. It's gonna be, like I said, super thick paste. But don't worry, it will dissolve, and as the sugar gets hotter, it melts. It'll turn thinner and thinner and thinner, and it'll start to turn clearer. And so all you gotta do is just keep jabbing at it, keep mixing it up. Make sure you're scraping the bottom of your pot. That's why I like to use a flat, what is this called? Spatula. A flat spatula type of wooden spoon, so I can really get in there and scrape the bottom of the pan. A heavy bottom pan would be best. Again, because you don't want it to caramelize, you don't want it to burn. So this is something you can't really walk away from. This might be a little bit longer video than usual, just because I want to show you the whole process, and it does take a few minutes to get to where it needs to be, but right now I can hear it starting to simmer, and it's getting thinner and thinner. So hopefully you guys can see here. See how it's still opaque and the sugar is not all completely dissolved yet, but little by little here it is definitely getting thinner and it's getting clearer. And just go ahead and make sure you're scraping the sides, because it will stick to the sides and crystallize in the sides. So that's all I'm doing right now. And once this gets to be once this gets to be boiling, I want it to get to a boil before I start adding the next stuff. I'm just looking at my notes here because I have a lot of handwritten notes that... Okay, keep on high, heat to 220. The temperature is not a huge deal, but it does give... I like it because it gives me a more measurable indication of when it's gotten to where it needs to be. Rolling boil is pretty much what you need to do. And this is like making candy, right? You have your soft ball, you have your hard ball, you have your crack stage. So you wanted to get it to the 220 degrees. That's what's going to get you that harder consistency at the end when you pour it. So let me grab my thermometer. Actually, that's the one thing I forgot to get. Instant rate thermometer is great because you could just stick it in there, see real quick. Now, another word of warning, you need to be careful when you're doing this, because if you've never worked with boiling sugar, it is like lava. If it gets on your skin, you're burned. Like, it's gonna hurt, and it's gonna stick there, and it's gonna keep on burning. It's the worst. So make sure you are careful. Sometimes I even will wear those cleaning gloves. Probably should be wearing those right now, honestly. when it starts to boil, because one little blip or bubble that pops up and splatters sugar, I'm 100% gonna get burned today. Just saying that right now, okay? I never make this without getting a little bit burned. It'll be like one little splatter, but I'm just saying, mentally prepare yourselves, because that's just the sacrifice I make for my bees. I do have, like I said, my heat on high right now, and it does take quite a bit of time. I mean, I say probably 5 to 10 minutes to get to the point where it starts to boil and bubble. So, like I said, what we're waiting on is we're waiting on this to get to 220, and all I have in here right now is just my sugar and my water. What I have pre-measured over here in this bowl, it's okay to stop stirring it just for a minute or two, as long as it's not to the point where it's bubbling and boiling. I have half a pound of pollen patties, which you can purchase from like a beekeeping supply place. It's a heavy crude pollen amount with heavy, I mean like there's a large amount of pollen in this, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of other things to keep it into like a paste consistency, but I have pre-measured 1/2 of a pound in here. I also pre-measured, in these little cups are great, 1/2 an ounce of lemon juice and 1 ounce of honey that came from my hives. And that's what I have in here. What I plan on doing is taking just a little bit of this boiling hot sugar syrup, ladling it into this separate bowl, and then using an immersion blender to blend this into a smooth, liquidy paste. The reason why I do this is because, like I said, I've made this mixture countless amounts of time, and every time you go to add those little bits of pollen patties in, it's like one of the last steps. It's so hard to get it incorporated in. It just wants to stay in its own little chunks, and it floats around, and I'm having to smush the pollen chunks against the side of the pan to really try to get them to melt. They're kind of resistant to melt into a consistent liquid, which is frustrating for me. So I've kind of learned if I take it off to the side and just mix it with a little amount of the warm liquid, hot liquid, I can get it to be a creamy paste liquid, pour it in, and it will mix almost effortlessly, evenly throughout the patties. You don't want to have your patties when you pour them be like giant chunks of I mean, I'm sure it'll be fine, but just consistent is better. So that's what I'm going to be planning on doing once this gets to the point where it's boiling. Like I said, it does take a few minutes. All right, so that's going to be our next step. Just kind of pre-prepping you guys. Like I said, being prepared and having everything planned out, reading through your instruction list, making sure you know the steps before you get into this is really important, because you don't want to be doing basically what I've done this 100 times. I'm just using this for reference, but you don't want to be like, wait, what? I'm supposed to, and then you're burnt sugar and it's trash. If you burn your sugar, you got to throw it out, or turn it into caramel syrup. I don't know. You could probably figure out something to do with it, but I would not feed it to your bees. So after I get this boiled, like I said, a rolling boil, it's gonna have to be like really kicking. I'm gonna take a little bit of ladle, I'm gonna stick it in here, I'm gonna just give this smaller bowl immersion blenders, like one of these stick blender thingies. You could also use this and stick it in here, and I have done that in the past, so we're gonna see which one I like better, which option I like better. I think this is going to be easier with the small amounts on the side. But that's going to be our next step. Then after that, what we're going to do, once we get the pollen mixture incorporated into the main batch, then we're going to take our spices, and that's going to be, like I said, I've already pre-mixed, okay? Since I'm doing a half batch, all of my measurements and proportions are for a half a batch. I have 1.5 teaspoons of ground nutmeg, 1.5 teaspoons of ground cinnamon, and it calls for 1.5 teaspoons of nutmeg, but I doubled the nutmeg. I use the essential oil that I have on hand. I don't know if I have a allspice. I don't know if I have that essential oil. Well, all right, we'll figure it out. I don't think I do. So we're gonna omit the allspice because I don't have that. But it is a good note to have, like if you have any type of food grade essential oils, you can substitute, for instance, nutmeg. Two drops of nutmeg oil equals an entire teaspoon of the dried powder stuff. So, like I said, I'm going to show you guys in real time how this works out because I am a human and sometimes do it the same thing. It's all right. The point is, pre-measure your spices. I'm gonna mix this in before I turn it off the heat. Can you guys see here? It's already really kind of bubbling. Hopefully you guys can see. Sorry, I gotta get better camera cooking angles. So it's rolling. It's bubbling. It's probably nowhere near 220. Well, let's see. Oh, it is 240. All right, so I was wrong. So this is really bubbling and rolling right now. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit because it's splattering and I don't want to, again, burn myself, which is going to 100% happen. Turn it down to just like a medium-high heat. Now this is where it gets a little precarious. I do two things at once here. I'm going to ladle just a little spoonful of this warm hot liquid into the side bowl. Sorry, I know you can't see that, but it is what it is. Because I'm going to turn this down just a little bit so I don't worry about this boiling. I'll take this over here so you guys can see. Sorry. And I'm just going to pulse this. Work it in. It's actually working pretty good. It's very chunky, so you have to kind of, it's like I said, the paste is super thick. But I think as soon as I get it, there we go. Mostly mixed in. Incorporate a little more of that liquid. Give this one more stir, just to scrape the bottom. It's fine, it's not even changing color at all, so it's good. Again, I don't want to caramelize it, so I'm going to turn down just another smidge. I've got a new immersion blender, and I'm not a fan of this one, to be honest. My other one is much better. Cool, that worked out pretty good. Alright, so those chunks turn into a liquidy. It literally looks just like peanut butter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just pour this in. Again, making sure you scrape the bottom. That actually worked out really well. I think I like that way better than, that was the first time I tried it that way. And I think I like it better this way than having to stick that huge immersion blender in this boiling pot of syrup, because that can get a little sketchy. All right, so what we've just added was our pollen, our lemon juice, our little bit of honey. A lot of these things are just to encourage the bees to feed on it. All right, let's crank the heat back up here, get it back to a rolling boil. And that mixed in way easier than having to try to do little tiny chunks. So it's good news. And as you can tell in this video, adapting and always changing, always trying new things is so important. When you're on a farm, when you're as a beekeeper, in life, like just always being able to be adaptable, trying new things, experimenting. That's how you continue to improve the process. So, like I said, I probably made this recipe 20 times, and I have gone through several variations and improvements. One, to try to make it easier on myself because I'm busy and I just want to make the process as efficient as possible. I mean, who doesn't, right? I think Mine's more out of like just pure desperation. I just need it to be as quick and as easy and as less frustrating as possible. So now that I've got this all mixed in, it's boiling, it's really rolling here. I've incorporated pollen. Just want to make sure I get all this stuff in there, all this goodness for the bees. I'm going to turn it off the heat in just a minute here. So now I'm going to turn off the heat. Everything's incorporated and good. And I'm not going to say it. I'll jinx myself. I'll say it at the end. It's not over yet. All right, next is going to be to add in the spice mixture. This one's a little annoying to mix in because the spices want to float to the top, but if you kind of just keep scraping it and stirring it in, it'll eventually work its way through. If you see any big chunks of anything, like the pollen maybe didn't get all mixed in, or there's a big chunk of spice or something, I usually just use my spatula and smash it against the side of the pot just to kind of spread it out and get it to mix in a little bit more evenly. There's a big chunk of pollen right there. Spices tend to stick together too. All right. Oh, there's another big chunk. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. It's just, you're just pouring it in tins and you're gonna feed it to the bees. But consistent is best. You honestly want to have it be as consistent as possible so all your hives get the same amount of stuff every time you feed them. A little bit more of that, mix that in. All right, cool. Last step. Actually, hold on real quick. Mix this in. I had a bunch of stuff in my immersion blender. A little bit on the counter. Pick that up off the counter. And since it's that liquidy paste that we just pre-mixed on the side, it pretty much melts immediately into the rest of the mixture, which is great. All right, give the bottom one more scrape. Last step is 1/2 pound of powdered sugar. As soon as you put this powdered sugar in there, it's gonna start like seizing up and hardening. And it will start to harden. As soon as you take it off the heat, it's gonna start to cool and turn into rock hard candy in like a matter of minutes. So that's why it's important that you have all of your tins pre-sprayed, pre-laid out. Let me see if I can move the camera so you guys can see this. Hold on. Let's see what I can do here. I think you're gonna have to look at my dirty counter. It's a camera. Oh, that's good enough. Real life. All right. I'll move this over here so you guys can see. Give me 1 second. There we go. It's good enough. All right, taking my pot of boiling hot candy. And what I'm gonna do is, like I said, I'm gonna take my powdered sugar and I'm gonna mix it in. Now this can get a little hard to mix in. All right, let's see. You guys can see still, right? This one's harder to do because you wanna get the chunks all out. I actually think I might grab my immersion blender real quick. Because then those chunks of powdered sugar just want to stay big old globs, so I'm gonna keep it right at the surface of the liquid without lifting it up too much. It incorporates all those floating chunks and kind of blends them all in. But again, make sure you don't lift it up too much off the surface because you're gonna splatter boiling hot liquid all over. All right. Ah, touched my hand with the side of the pot. Oh, so close. Not burning myself in this video. See, that's why I didn't say it earlier, because it ain't over yet. All right, so now it is thickening on the sides. It's starting to build up and really kind of adhere to the sides. I'm taking my spatula and I am smashing any big chunks of powdered sugar so they spread more evenly. And it's pretty consistent. I got a few chunks of powdered sugar, but it's kind of unavoidable unless you really start to get super thorough about the mixing. Like I said, you're kind of on a time crunch here because it is thickening and cooling as we speak. So I'm pretty happy with that. It's not perfect. There are a few little tiny chunks of floating powdered sugar, but it's not going to affect the product at all. All right, hopefully you guys can see this. Here's what this looks like. It's still really runny. I'm gonna go ahead and spoon this in. Again, be careful. It's very hot and it will burn whatever surface it touches. I like the square pans because I like the smaller ones better, so I'm gonna try to. Don't be like me. Make sure you finish one patty. You can't go and evenly mix because then you'll have layers and it'll be crumbly. And so just put a good amount in. I put about I don't know, 3/4 of an inch to an inch of, actually probably more like half an inch to 3/4 of an inch of liquid. That's the thickness of each patty. And that'll make it so you can still put it in a shim, like a feeding shim, but not too thick where it won't fit. Also, it won't be so thin where it's gonna break. You gotta have it be kind of that perfect. Should probably move this down just a little bit. I'm trying to get to a good spot where you guys can see without burning myself. So stand with me, stay with me. There we go, it's probably better. I like these sizes. I think the little 8x8s, the 7x7s are manageable for a lot of hives. I like the square because I can fit them more neatly on top of a hive. Put a little bit more on this one. And make sure you seal these things in an airtight container, like a giant Ziploc bag. I put them in a 5-gallon bucket and the moisture got in there and they were totally ruined. So that's why I'm having to make more. I was kind of frustrated with that. I made a whole huge batch a few months ago and went out to use it the other day and I was like, shoot, it had totally just, like the humidity and moisture had gotten in there and it was just fermented in mush and it was a nightmare. So Make sure you store these with the proper humidity control. All right, and this is kind of just where we're at now. Just kind of fill it and move it off to the side, fill the next one. These big giant pans are great for larger hives, if you have stronger hives. This will fit on top of the on top of the brood frames. So you're gonna have to put a feeding shim, like I was mentioning, on top of your brood box to give enough extra space to slide this in. Obviously, hives are designed with the perfect amount of bee space. If you put your inner cover on top of your brood box, there's not going to be enough space in between your inner cover and your brood on the top of your frames. So you need to add that extra feeding spacer. And this is the perfect way to do that. Like I said, make sure you put it directly on top of your brood frames. You do not want to put it like on top of a honey super, because your bees are going to have to go all the way up through that brood box and honey super in order to get to that food, which kind of defeats the purpose. You want it to be easy and quick for them to access. Depending on what your hive setup is, you know, obviously it might change based on your individual situation, but this works out great. Like I said, the hard candy version or consistency, the bees have to chew at it, like they have to get up there and obviously chew at the hard candy, but it won't ferment. They don't have to worry about it chilling them. And it's pretty non-perishable. Like, it's not going to mold very easy. It's not going to, you're not going to get hive beetle larvae that will start to be growing in this, because like I said, the solid pollen patties, I've learned the hard way, if you put too much on your hive, those hive beetles will get in that and they'll make just a freaking nursery out of it. And it is the grossest thing ever when you go to check on your hives and you pull out that piece of pollen patty and it's just infested with the larva, and your bees aren't going to eat that, obviously. So it's pretty much wasted money and effort. All right, I need to get one more tin here. Scooch this all down here. Like I said, I have some towels here that it's so hot. Even the pans are like, I can't touch them because they're freaking hot. That's why I said make sure you put that towel down, because these things are scalding hot. Also, make sure they are out of the way. If you have small children, make sure you do not put these, or grandkids, do not put these where your kids are going to get into them, because for at least a good solid 30 minutes, these are going to burn your kids or your pets, you know, anything like that. All right. So on the side of it, it's starting to harden. It's starting to thicken. This is turning into like a giant club. My stainless steel one broke, so ideally you should use stainless steel because it's kind of... God, the side of the pan is still really hot. You can tell it's getting thicker. Like it's more like a slushy consistency now instead of liquid. And this is where it gets tough the last little bit after everything starts to cool. I'll show you the pan. I'm scraping the pan here, but it's got all this stuff that's building up, so I really I gotta try to scoop out the liquid stuff while I can still. So I'm on a race against time right now. And this one might be a little bit short on materials, so I'm just gonna kind of use my spatula and spread it out, make sure it gets into all the corners evenly. When it's still hot and liquidy, you can kind of spread it around a little bit and it will self-level still. All right, time to move on to my wooden. It's still palatable, like it's still, or pliable, not palatable. You don't want to eat this, it's not gonna be good. It's so pliable. You kind of scrape it. But like I said, whenever you have this snow-like consistency on the side of my pan now, and I just scrape off as much as I can. All those drips are like solid. I gotta use a little bit of elbow here. Like I said, it's still warm, so I'm kind of able, I am able to scrape most of the thicker layered stuff off from the bottom of the pan. And I'll show you, even though it's kind of like a crumble now at this point, you can still add it on to your liquidy patty, and it'll melt in and adhere to the top. Might not look as pretty as the first couple, because the first couple are going to be nice and smooth. This one's going to be kind of crumbly, but it's fine though. It'll be just as well for the bees. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. It's crumbly. Using the edge, using the corner of my spatula to kind of dig little grooves. It's like about 1/4 of an inch thick, built up on the side to make the grooves. And that makes it easier to kind of pop off chunks. I think that's about it though. It's about as much as I'm gonna try at this point. I'm done giving this effort. But you can see that's gonna be, no matter what, it's gonna be kind of what happens. So I'm just gonna spread out these chunks just a little bit. And then just sort of press them into the top. And since the bottom of this is still pretty liquidy, it's definitely turning more into a paste, it will harden with all of this crumble. Most of this crumble will stick to the top of the patty. That's that. Let me turn you back around here and oh, that's not. Hold on. I'm my own cameraman. Also, I don't know how to use this stuff. All right, that's that. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this was helpful. I know it was kind of all over the place, but that's usually how my cooking videos are, right? So the takeaways I would like to make sure you guys take away are, if you make a whole bunch of this in advance, it's great to have on hand. I have, quite a few of those patties now that I can save. I'm definitely not going to use them all right now. I have 4 hives active right now, so I'll obviously use 4 of these chunks, throw it on there, monitor how quickly they go through them, take notes of your hives. If you have a really strong hive, they might go through quicker, obviously, than the weaker ones. And make sure that you're feeding all of your hives. Do not feed 1, 2, and leave the other 2 out. You will learn the hard way. Those hives will be robbed out. It's another word of warning. I did this the first year or 2 of beekeeping. I've made all of the mistakes, right? I've learned the hard way, all of the hard lessons. And you probably will too. If you're a beekeeper, you'll probably learn some hard lessons that will stick with you. Don't give up. Stick with it. Just learn from your mistakes and move on, right? But I made the mistake of feeding one of my hives, not the other. I had one weaker hive, like the first or second year I came out of the spring, or winter and into the spring. I fed one hive. The strong hive went right over next door to the weak one, killed that entire hive so that they could get to the sugar syrup that I had given that weaker hive. Heartbreaking, like so heartbreaking. That was one of the hardest lessons I learned, because I did that to that hive. Like, I murdered that hive. Obviously I was trying to help them, but I ended up, signing their death sentence. So that's another word of warning. Make sure you feed all your hives. And if your strong hive doesn't need it, that's fine. They'll leave it there. You can tell that they won't go through it as quickly. It's not going to be any harm to like give them a little bit of extra food. Chances are, if they're really strong, they found a forage source, they're going to be bringing in their own stuff, which is the ideal situation. They're going to prefer natural nectar, natural pollen to, you know, a sugar substitute. But at least it's there in case they really do need it, and they're not going to go over to their next door neighbor and kill that hive for the food source that you just gave them. All right, well, if you have any questions, please post them in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate the support. Hopefully this is helpful for you guys. Again, I know it's all over the place. I'll try to post the recipe in the comments. And that way you guys can try to make this for yourself. All right, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.